The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey was probably the most disappointing movie I've ever seen. I'm not trying to insult the movie or the fans, Professor Tolkien, or Peter Jackson. Well, it didn't hold up to the original trilogy, which are, in my mind, together a masterpiece of film that will never be outdone. A fantastical world with elves, dwarves, hobbits, wizards, trolls, orcs, mystical powers, places, war, and politics. And it all felt real. Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and Return of the King all captured something special. That sense of escape that only film can achieve. Before I start picking on this boring middle child of a film, let me turn back the clock about 5 or 6 years.
Let's see if you bastards can do 90.
The trilogy is done. Return of the King tied Ben-Hur and Titanic for the most Academy Awards. Jackson's King Kong is a box office hit. And then rumors grew of a Hobbit prequel, or prequels that Jackson, Walsh, and Boyens were going to script and Guillermo del Toro was going to direct. That's right. Jackson only wanted to write and produce. A lot of fans said, wait, what? Jackson has to direct. Remember this, I'll come back to it later. Then Jackson goes on to make The Lovely Bones, which is more in line with his earlier storytelling days like Heavenly Creatures, and then The Hobbit is about to be greenlit. But then a bunch of studios got into a playground fight over who gets the best toy, and they end up going to court fighting over the rights to the movie, and it gets postponed. Del Toro loses patience and leaves in the middle of pre-production. A few weeks or months, I don't know, go by, and eventually Jackson was signed to write and produce and direct, just like the original trilogy. Fans, including myself, had a collective sigh of relief.
And it was announced that the book would be split into 2 films, and the content of the book,
rather slim looking,
would be backed up by the appendices, just like the original trilogy. Everything was looking awesome, and I couldn't have been more excited. I watched all the production vlogs as they were released, waiting to go back into Middle-earth after 10 years with fresh movies. Then after principal shooting wrapped, and after they released the first trailer, Jackson announces that instead of 2 films, it will be 3. Okay. What? This was the first red flag that made me go, what the fuck? And here's why.
For those of you who don't know, a general guideline for writing movies is the 3-act structure.
Act 1 is the first quarter of your film to set up character and plot. We get to know our protagonist, his or her flaws and strengths. They usually have a need, some sort of void in their life to fill, or a lesson to learn. And it's usually something they choose to do that starts the story with plot point 1.
I was best shot in my regiment. How come?
2 last hopes is better than 1.
All right, I'm in.
Plot point 1 launches you into the second act. This is where the second and third quarter of the film, where the majority of the plot elements, drama, action, and character development occur. Act 2 generally ends with another plot point that pushes us into the final build-up, climax, and denouement, that is the third act. This is where the character's arc is completed, where they've learned something, overcome a fear, or achieved something they didn't have in the first act. Maybe they've even changed or developed into a different personality. The plot is generally wrapped up nicely along with the character's arc. This is something usually planned early on in the script writing.
In Fellowship of the Ring, Act 1 has the prologue to set up the story, an introduction to hobbits. We meet Bilbo and Gandalf and Frodo, our protagonist, a young and happy guy who clearly is enjoying his quiet life in the Shire. We establish that the ring is evil and something needs to be done with it. Then Frodo chooses to selflessly do with the ring whatever Gandalf tells him to do, which is to go to Bree.
What's I do?
This launches us into Act 2, where things get really interesting. They get chased by ring wraiths, Gandalf gets betrayed, and we meet Aragorn, a gruff and grungy man who looks like a hermit, and at first we don't know if he can be trusted. He's rough on the outside, but we slowly learn that he has some kindness underneath and is actually the heir to this guy, who really fucked things up for everyone. This strips away the rough shell and reveals how much room to grow he has. The second act ends when Frodo, taking the advice of Galadriel, again chooses to take the ring to Mordor, knowing that it might mean having to do it alone. Act 3 has the Uruk-hai tracking the Fellowship, fighting, there's an action climax, an emotional climax. Frodo, having faced death and emotional isolation, still decides to make the right choice and venture on to Mordor alone. He's no longer the carefree hobbit from the first act. Aragorn overcomes the power of the ring, learns to accept his Gondorian heritage, and makes a promise to Boromir to try to save it. He's much different from when we first met him. Then the movie ends. It's excellent writing, hence why it was nominated for a Best Adapted Screenplay. Now you can see why I said, what the fuck, when they decided to turn 2 movies into 3 after it had been shot. It's not like it were a last-minute pre-production decision where they could still scramble to make it work before they start shooting. Imagine someone gave you a can of Spam and told you to make Thanksgiving dinner for 1,000 people. You all know the original trilogy. Imagine trying to turn it into 5 movies that were each 3 hours long. I guess Fellowship would have to end after Gandalf's death in Moria. Sure, it has a climax. It hits the heartstrings. But what about character arcs? Frodo learns that this mission sucks, and that's about it. Aragorn gets nothing out of it. Sam cries on the ground. It wouldn't be satisfying. Kind of like how An Unexpected Journey ended.
Let's take a look at the structure of The Hobbit. We meet Bilbo. There's a prologue. We meet Bilbo again. He's a middle-aged hobbit who seems to enjoy comfort and normality a little too much. Gandalf introduces the idea of an adventure. We meet the dwarves. And then Bilbo makes the spontaneous decision to go on an adventure.
Then we're off on the plot to reclaim a lost city taken by a dragon. Hey, that's not that involving. They're not saving the world and destroying evil. They're just kind of trying to get some old gold back. Oh well.
At this point onward, the plot really doesn't change at all. They just walk a lot and fight a little. But all the action isn't really related to the plot. It's just a fight. You'd think at Rivendell something new would happen to change their journey, but it doesn't.
Keep in mind at this point in the Fellowship of the Ring, Frodo has almost died, and they decided to take the ring to Mordor to be destroyed. The dwarves are doing the same thing here they were 90 minutes ago. Anyways, more walking, more fighting, more falling. Bilbo finds the ring, which doesn't affect the plot in any way in this movie. They escape, they fight some more. Bilbo finally does something, then they escape. Everyone cheers, roll credits. Oh, where's the payoff? Where was this? It wasn't there. There wasn't a dramatic climax other than this. Maybe. The action climax doesn't really have the plot dangling in danger. If Dori and Ori drop to their death, Smaug and Erebor don't disappear. If Lurtz captures Frodo, they get the ring. It's all over. I guess if Thorin dies, the quest might have to end, but couldn't Balin take the throne? So maybe there's some tension here. But come on. Thorin should have killed him here. But for some reason, lazy writing lets him get carried away. Then the rest of the movie, Balin, Gandalf, and the audience are a step ahead of Thorin, knowing that Azog is still alive.
And Thorin still doesn't kill Azog.
Thorin's situation and arc isn't much different than this moment 2 hours ago. If anything, you think, wow, Thorin's really bad at getting shit done. What is Bilbo's arc? He leaves his sheltered lifestyle and learns to rough it in the wild. Okay. He fights a couple of orcs. He decides to rejoin the company when he could just walk away and gives this nice little monologue, then courageously saves Thorin. Hey, yeah. Okay, so Bilbo gains courage. That's not so bad. All right, what's Thorin's arc? Well, he decides to go to the Lonely Mountain and take back Erebor. He starts off kind of grumpy, especially with Bilbo. If he's in charge, why even allow someone you don't like in the company? I don't know. Anyway, they start the journey. He's grumpy. They continue the journey. He's grumpy. He almost dies a few times. He's grumpy. He gets bludgeoned in the face and suddenly likes Bilbo. What? What kind of arc is that? I guess he's grateful to Bilbo for saving his life, but did he even notice? He's half out of it. And didn't Bilbo already save his life?
He had announced to play for time. None of the rest of you thought of that.
I don't know why you guys even attacked the trolls. They released Bilbo. You could have run away. Not only does Thorin's emotional arc come unnaturally, they choose the cheesiest style of presenting it with misleading dialogue.
You nearly got yourself killed. Did I not say that you would be a burden? I have never been so wrong in all my life.
Then the dwarves all cheer like the live audience watching The Big Bang Theory. You might be saying that Bilbo's monologue convinced him of Bilbo's worth, and then Bilbo saving his life seals it. But that basically means that Thorin's arc goes like this. Thorin does not like Bilbo.
He is long gone.
Thorin feels sad. Thorin really likes Bilbo. All in the span of 15 minutes. I guess you would call that lazy writing. These moments Has nothing on these moments.
Thorin's arc with Bilbo seemed so contrived that it must have been due to the split into 3 films. His arc probably wasn't meant to be complete until well after these events that just took place.
Maybe his arc was wrapped up nicer after the spiders and barrel sequence. But with all the reshooting and re-editing they're doing, I guess we'll never know. Maybe I'm totally wrong and Jackson has done something like this before. Actually, this does sound familiar.
Miramax was starting to say, well, we really feel like we want to do it in one film.
And Peter said, there's no way I can tell this in one movie and do it any justice, so I can't do that.
And I said, we've got to somehow convince somebody to make 2 Lord of the Rings films. We've got 4 weeks to do it.
Called upon his old friend Mark Gordeski, who was an executive at New Line. And Mark set up a meeting with Bob Shea. Bob looked at Peter and said, now, Peter, why would anybody in their right mind make 2 movies?
Which shattered them both because they didn't quite know what he meant. He said, this is 3 films.
Oh, it did happen. How do they deal with it?
Basically take our 2 scripts that we'd written for Miramax, and we had to now reorganize these into 3 different movies. And that really involved a total restructuring, page 1 rewrite.
God damn it.